Harry was exposed by a tabloid newspaper for smoking cannabis and underage drinking in pubs close to Highgrove. Harry's illegal escapades were confirmed by Charles's biographer, Penny Junor.
Prince Harry was rushed to a hospital in California in an unconscious state after an apparent drug overdose. Although timely intervention pulled him back from the brink, his condition remains deeply concerning. A nurse revealed that on that very night, Prince William quietly visited his younger brother. No escort, no prior notice. No one knew he was coming, and even now it's unclear why he came. The meeting took place in the intensive care unit behind fully closed doors. No one was allowed in. No recording devices were permitted. All that is known is this. When William emerged, his face was as cold and expressionless as stone. Less than 10 minutes later, the hospital's emergency alarm sounded. Harry went into cardiac shock. Doctors immediately performed defibrillation in a race against time to restore his heartbeat, caught in the fragile space between life and death. A haunting question immediately surfaced. What did William say that caused Harry to collapse so completely? Was it a truth too brutal to bear a final warning, or something Harry was never emotionally prepared to face? Perhaps this is only the beginning, where truth, bloodline, and personal choice are now colliding in the most violent of ways. 1. The arrival of William. Prince William's visit did not appear on any official schedule. None of the royal security personnel in Los Angeles had been notified in advance. The British Embassy in the U.S. declined to comment. A close source from Cedars-Sinai Hospital, where Harry was being treated, confirmed to the press that William arrived at approximately 1:20 a.m., carrying a small backpack, wearing a baseball cap and a face mask, looking no different from any relative visiting a patient. According to 2 nurses on the night shift, William requested to go directly to Harry's room without going through any reception or offering any explanation. He didn't need to say much. We looked into his eyes and understood calm, but carrying something unbearably heavy, one nurse recalled. When reminded that Prince Harry was in a restricted area, William simply replied, "I know." Just minutes later, the door to the room was shut. Some medical staff were asked to leave. No one else was allowed in. No cameras. No recording devices of any kind were permitted inside. A volunteer who happened to pass by the area at the time reported, "I heard very soft voices." Then silence. Then what sounded like quiet sobbing. I don't know who it was, but it definitely wasn't a fight. We are talking about 2 men who grew up under the relentless flash of the global media, who once stood side by side at Princess Diana's funeral, their mother, who once shared a loss too deep for words, and who for many years since had nearly no direct conversations with each other. Harry once publicly admitted that William didn't truly understand him. In contrast, William was said to be deeply angered by what Harry and Meghan revealed in the memoir and documentary series. But in that moment, there was nothing standing between them. No media, no advisors, no rehearsed lines. Just 2 human beings, 2 blood brothers facing each other in a stark hospital room where the only remaining boundary was the thin line between life and death. William stayed for 53 minutes. This was no casual drop-in. 53 minutes, long enough to say everything that had never been spoken, or perhaps simply to sit silently and look at each other one last time. Upon leaving, according to a doctor on duty, William stood still for a long while in the hallway. He stared at the door, then quietly turned away. No goodbye, no glance back. Just walked away as if what had just happened was the only thing he had come to do. And at that very moment, as William left the hospital, events began unfolding at an unusual pace. Just minutes later, the heart monitor in Harry's room began sounding continuous alarms. A sudden episode of tachyarrhythmia, an abnormal and rapid heartbeat, occurred without warning. An emergency doctor was immediately called in. The full emergency alarm system of the unit was triggered. Harry went into cardiac shock. 2, the shocking words. Everything happened so quickly. William had just left the room for less than 10 minutes when the vital signs monitor alarms blared urgently. Emergency doctors rushed down the hallway, and nurses pushed emergency equipment carts into place. One doctor on the night shift recalled, "We received a signal from the heart monitor. The patient's heart rate suddenly spiked to nearly 180. It wasn't a normal increase, it was an extreme emotional response. Harry was nearly overwhelmed by his own psychological state. Why would a 39-year-old man in generally good health and recently out of critical condition fall into such a severe cardiac shock that defibrillation was required? The first nurse on the scene who spoke under the condition of anonymity recounted, "He didn't scream. He didn't resist. He just opened his eyes. Tears streaming uncontrollably, his chest heaving violently, and he kept repeating a few barely audible sentences. It was as if someone had just taken away the last thing he had left to hold on to." The internal medical report simply noted acute psychological disturbance, excessive emotional response triggered by external stimuli. But that so-called external stimulus, if not from William, then from whom their meeting had no doctor, no therapist, no advisors, no third-party witnesses. That meant no one to supervise, no transcripts. Just two men, each burdened with expectations, wounds, prejudices, and unspoken truths, sitting face-to-face for the first time after years of estrangement. And then one of them nearly collapsed from just a few words. So what did William say? The first theory suggests it was a final warning. Some royal commentators speculate that William didn't come to reconcile, but to deliver the blunt message the family had kept hidden. If Harry continued down his current path, he would no longer be protected, would receive no inheritance, and would lose all status. A severance not through action, but through a cold final declaration. A former royal aide shared with the Independent View. If William said he wasn't coming back, that it was over, and Harry had to learn to accept that, then with Harry's fragile mental state at the time, a breakdown was completely understandable. The second theory suggests it was an unexpected act of forgiveness. Perhaps William, after years of anger, chose to let go. But instead of bringing relief, that forgiveness may have been unbearable for Harry? A man in the midst of an identity crisis, mentally fractured, isolated by the media, lost and adrift. Receiving forgiveness at the very moment he felt most deserving of hatred that could have been a psychological blow beyond his ability to endure. Sometimes timely compassion is the very thing that breaks the most fragile, explained Dr. Kate Morgan, a family psychology expert at Stanford University. Some people trap themselves in darkness because they don't want to be saved. If someone reaches out at the right moment, they'll either break down in tears or sink deeper because they feel undeserving of redemption. The third theory, more difficult to confront, but even more disturbing, is that a long-buried truth was finally revealed. Perhaps William said something related to their past, the family, or even Meghan, something Harry had never dared to face. It could have been, "Meghan never loved you," or "You're no longer yourself," or perhaps a message from King Charles, "If Harry doesn't change, all ties will be cut permanently." No one knows, and perhaps no one ever will. That's what makes it all the more haunting, because between them lie countless words never spoken, and once uttered, the listener's heart couldn't bear them. On social media, public discourse erupted into chaos. The hashtag, "What did William say?" climbed into the global top 3 trends in under 6 hours. TikTok, Reddit, and Instagram overflowed with clips mimicking dialogues, forming theories, analyzing every possible version of the brothers' conversation. Some believed William had begged Harry to come home. Others were convinced he declared the family had lost all faith in him. Yet another perspective, rarely mentioned, but possibly the most grounded, suggests the issue wasn't what William said, but how Harry heard it. When someone is in psychological exhaustion, they don't listen with reason. They hear through emotional filters. A gentle word can feel like a blade. A sorrowful look can be perceived as rejection. And if Harry was already too fragile in that moment, then even the smallest truth could have been the drop that overflowed the glass. That cardiac shock wasn't the result of one night. It was the culmination of years of emotional buildup, childhood trauma, the devastating loss of his mother, relentless media scrutiny, the rupture from the royal family, the public criticisms of his kin, and the controversial relationship with Meghan, all like a long, dormant bomb that finally detonated during 53 minutes that no one else witnessed. And then everything fell silent again. Neither side spoke. The Prince of Wales's office declined to comment. Harry and Meghan's U.S. representative office gave no response, but there was one small change that sent chills down the spines of attentive observers. The Instagram account, as in Sussex Royal dormant for a long time, was abruptly deactivated just one day later. No announcement, no explanation. Was it a strategic retreat or the fallout from that conversation? Once again, no one knows. Only one thing is certain this time: the public scrutiny wasn't on Harry anymore. All eyes turned toward William, the brother who had stayed silent for years, and with just one sentence, nearly stopped his brother's heart. 3. The letter from King Charles, and Harry's cold rejection. Immediately after news of Prince Harry's cardiac shock spread widely, Buckingham Palace remained completely silent. There was no official statement, not a single public message of well-wishing. However, behind the ancient walls of St. James's Palace, an early morning meeting was quietly convened, chaired personally by King Charles III. A source close to the royal cabinet revealed that the monarch was neither angry nor confused, but clearly deeply troubled and had been unable to sleep all night. That very morning, he sat down and penned a handwritten letter to his youngest son, a rare act in an age dominated by email and instant communication, and a testament to how this matter had gone beyond royal protocol to become the private grief of a father. The letter was sent through diplomatic channels and hand-delivered to a representative at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. But what came next was unexpected. Harry, who had just escaped the jaws of death, refused to accept the letter. A nurse recounted that upon being informed of a message from his father, the King Harry simply stared at the envelope and coldly uttered 3 words, "I don't want it." He didn't tear it up, he didn't throw it away, but he didn't read it either. The letter was eventually returned and sealed within the royal family's archives. That unequivocal rejection was not an isolated act. Throughout the 3 days of recovery following the critical episode, Harry had no contact with anyone outside the medical team. Meghan, who had always stood by him in public, was nowhere to be seen. Their 2 children, Archie and Lilibet, were not mentioned. There were no phone calls, no images, no signs from the outside world. This state of isolation prompted a haunting question. Why, in such a life-or-death moment, did Harry push away those closest to him? Was it merely a result of physical exhaustion or a conscious choice? Had Harry come to believe he had gone too far to look back? Dr. Rebecca Hollins, a behavioral analyst at University College London, remarked, "When a person rejects both their biological father and the family they created themselves, there are usually only 2 possibilities. Either they are drowning in overwhelming guilt, or they feel so profoundly misunderstood that no one is worthy of understanding their pain." In Harry's case, it's likely both were true. His relationship with his father had been fractured for years. Even when Charles was still Prince of Wales, American media often portrayed him as a cold, distant father who favored William. Though unverified, Harry himself hinted in his Oprah interview that "my father doesn't understand my pain and doesn't want to." That distance reached its peak with the release of Spare, where Harry described his father as someone who can forgive but never forget, a man who always prioritized royal image over the emotional needs of his children. Charles never publicly responded, but his silence was never empty. An insider once revealed that Charles had confided in a close advisor, "He's my son, but he's no longer part of the crown. I have to split my mind half as a father, half as a king." Perhaps that very division was the irreparable fracture between them. So what compelled Charles to write the letter? Maybe he realized that time, his, not Harry's, was running out. At 75, having just recovered from cancer treatment and facing increasing political pressure in the UK, Charles likely knew that if he didn't reach out now, there might not be another chance. Though Harry had stepped away from royal duties, a medical crisis involving him still struck at the image of the monarchy. But more deeply, perhaps, Charles was trying to salvage the last remnants of fatherhood he had left. Yet Harry still refused. No reply, not even a glance at the familiar handwriting of the man who raised him after Princess Diana's death. The question now is, was Harry still angry at his father, or did he no longer believe in the sincerity of the letter? One theory raised by royal observers suggests Meghan or a member of Harry's media team controlled all the information he received during recovery. Perhaps the letter never truly reached him. Perhaps he was advised not to read it to avoid further psychological distress in his fragile state. One detail stood out during his entire hospital stay: Harry was not allowed to use any electronic devices. No phone, no laptop, no internet. The official reason cited was to protect his mental stability. But who made that decision? Meghan. The doctors, Harry himself. Whatever the answer, the result remained unchanged. All connections were cut off. from his father, from his wife and children, even from the person he once was. Harry was still alive, but it was as if he had sealed himself away from the entire world. Veteran journalist Martin Baxter once wrote in the London Review, "An unread letter is not just a failure of communication or protocol, it is the purest tragedy of a powerful family where love must break through layers of barriers just to reach the recipient's heart." No one but King Charles knows what he wrote in that letter. But people believe one thing for certain: it was not a letter of reproach. A king does not write by hand to assign blame. He wrote it perhaps to hold on to whatever was left of fatherly love. And when that letter was rejected, all that remained was a void between an aging father wearing a crown and a lost son adrift in freedom pain and unhealed memories. For Meghan. The figure behind the tragedy, Meghan Markle's complete absence during Prince Harry's critical medical emergency has sparked widespread speculation. For years, Harry's every appearance was accompanied by Meghan not just as a wife, but as a spokesperson, image advisor, and even strategic media planner. From major televised interviews to documentary launches and overseas tours in the US, Canada, and Germany, Meghan was always at the forefront. But this time, when Harry's life was at serious risk, Meghan vanished entirely. There were no photos of her at the hospital, no official statements, no social media posts offering comfort, not even from accounts tied to Archewell, the organization she co-founded with Harry. For the first 96 hours following the incident, Meghan seemed to have evaporated from the media, and this disappearance did not appear coincidental. The prolonged silence quickly fueled speculation. Was Meghan deliberately keeping her distance to avoid attention during a sensitive time? Or conversely, was she no longer allowed to be present in what could be the most critical chapter of Harry's life? Or perhaps in some way she was the underlying cause behind Harry's fragile mental state, so much so that a few words from his brother could trigger a cardiac event. To understand Meghan's true role in this crisis, one must look back at her entire journey from the moment she joined the royal family to now. From a mid-level Hollywood actress, Meghan Markle became the Duchess of Sussex in a globally televised royal wedding in 2018. At the time, she was hailed as a fresh-breeze, modern, multicultural, independent, and intelligent. But within less than 2 years, that positive image shifted dramatically. Meghan began accusing the royal family of racism, control, and isolation. She and Harry stepped down from their senior roles, moved to North America, and embarked on an unrelenting media campaign. In her explosive interview with Oprah, Winfrey Meghan spoke of suicidal thoughts, complete abandonment, and even concerns raised about the skin color of her unborn child, claims that sent global shockwaves. Yet when cross-referencing Meghan's claims with known facts, the media discovered multiple inconsistencies in timelines, contexts, and even witness accounts. British tabloids highlighted mismatched details about the real wedding date, the racism allegations, and other unverifiable statements. Meanwhile, the American press stood firmly behind Meghan. They saw her as a symbol of resistance against royal conservatism, a brave voice breaking unspoken rules. Netflix signed multi-million-dollar deals for documentaries. Spotify poured millions into her podcast. Penguin Random House published Spare, where Harry recounted traumas from childhood to his royal exit. Since then, Meghan appeared to be at the center of all major decisions Harry made. Observers noted that since their marriage, Harry rarely made independent statements. Every move bore Meghan's influence, from personal schedules to charitable efforts to public image crafting. The question arose, was this influence a result of deep love or a form of subtle control? Dr. Alice Branton, a marital psychologist at Harvard, remarked that in certain relationships, one deeply hurt partner may allow the other to govern their entire life. While such behavior may begin as protection, it can evolve into a barrier that slowly erodes autonomy. In that context, if it's true that Harry refused to see Meghan after regaining consciousness, it is no small matter. A Cedars-Sinai staff member revealed that Meghan's representatives had requested a visit, but Harry gently declined, saying he needed peace. Could it be that in the face of death, Harry realized something profound about their relationship, or at the very least needed a moment of solitude to rediscover himself beyond the towering identity of being Meghan's husband? A theory emerged. Perhaps William's words that night involved Meghan. Maybe the elder brother posed a simple yet piercing question: Are you sure she loves you for who you are or for who you used to be? If such a statement was spoken not harshly, not judgmentally, it could still break Harry. For years, he had placed his full trust in Meghan, seeing her as the only anchor when the rest of his family turned their backs. If that trust wavered, Harry's inner world might collapse entirely. Those once close to Harry former friends, personal aides, even military comrades have consistently said that Harry changed significantly post-marriage. Some even bluntly stated he wasn't himself anymore. Sergeant Thomas Keaton, who served alongside Harry in Afghanistan, once said at a veterans gathering, he used to be the guy who'd march tens of miles in the scorching sun for his unit. Now I just see a TV figure led by someone else. Of course, such comments don't define the full truth, but they reflect the reality that Harry has lived at the intersection of fame trauma and transformation with Meghan as the central axis. The lingering question, was her presence a journey of emotional support or a media strategy where every pain could be turned into content? The final question perhaps circles back to the beginning. If Meghan truly loves Harry, would she be there to hold his hand in crisis, or only when the camera is rolling? And if William was the only one brave enough to voice what others feared to say, then Harry's cardiac shock, was it caused by that truth, or was it the inevitable result of an awakening? 5. The boundaries of brotherhood. In the eyes of the global public, William and Harry were not only prominent figures of the British royal family, but once hailed as the ideal embodiment of brotherhood rising above loss. The image of two young boys in black suits walking side by side behind Princess Diana's casket in 1997 became an indelible symbol etched into the collective memory of modern Britain. William was 15 at the time, Harry just 12. From that moment on, many believed the brothers would always be each other's anchor, one destined for the throne, the other the spare, yet both growing up under the glare of the media and the immense burden of royalty. Throughout the 2000s, they stood shoulder to shoulder at events, polo matches, charitable missions, military service, and media appearances, like an inseparable duo. But what fractured that once unbreakable bond? Many analysts trace the cracks back to William's marriage to Kate Middleton. Harry began to feel pushed aside. No longer were they the brothers sharing a flat at Kensington Palace. No more trips together. Suddenly, Harry became the odd one out in a newly restructured family where he was no longer the center. That quiet sense of alienation grew and ultimately erupted when Harry met Meghan. In love, he found a new anchor, a new home, a new purpose, one that lay far outside the royal family's traditional framework. And when he chose to step back from royal duties, the divide between him and William ceased to be geographical. It became ideological. William, a man shaped by duty and the belief in serving the institution above the self, couldn't comprehend his brother's decision. In private conversations, William reportedly warned life outside isn't as simple as you think. But Harry didn't listen. The rift only deepened. In his memoir, Spare, Harry recounts a shocking moment William once shoved him into a wall during an argument over Meghan. Though William has never confirmed the incident, the detail alone was enough to convince the public that the fracture between them was real and perhaps irreparable. Yet William's quiet arrival at the hospital, that fateful night without fanfare or cameras, suggests that brotherhood, though strained, hadn't been completely severed. And that nuance made the story all the more layered. One question lingered: did William come to save what remained of their bond, or to say a final goodbye? Whatever he said triggered Harry's heart shock. Was it a finishing blow or a final human touch? In the end, brotherhood endures, but only up to a point. Dr. Malcolm Firth, a psychologist, once wrote in the Guardian Psychology Review, "Blood ties are immensely strong but not indestructible. They can be eroded by judgment, feelings of betrayal, or simply too much silence between injuries. Eventually, one no longer knows whether to step closer or to walk away." Viewed through the lens of emotion, Harry's heart shock was not merely a physical event, but an emotional detonation years in the making. It didn't come from William, Meghan, or even Charles, but from the internal collapse of Harry's own world, when every belief he clung to began to crumble. Perhaps in the moment William sat by the hospital bed, Harry faced the brother he had loved, resented, and feared losing. And when William uttered something too real, too raw, Harry's emotional defenses shattered. A longtime friend of both brothers told The Telegraph, William is not someone who lashes out or uses harsh words. He's usually more patient than reactive. But when he does speak, it's something you won't forget because it's honest and precise. Which is why the strongest theory isn't that William insulted his brother, but that he simply said what Harry had spent years avoiding. Maybe something as simple as "I don't recognize you anymore." Or more cruelly, if Mum were still alive, she wouldn't recognize you either. And if those words were said at Harry's weakest moment, at the threshold of life and death, they might have torn deeper than any physical wound. It's also possible that William didn't come to beg or threaten, but to deliver a final choice: either Harry returns or it's truly over. And if that's true, then the shock Harry experienced wasn't just emotional, it was the recognition that there may be no path back. Among the many theories, only one thing is certain: brotherhood is not eternal. Even among blood relatives, the bond has limits. And once tested by honor media pressure, fractured trust, and poor choices, it can vanish in a storm of emotion. The final question remains: can Harry return? Can he find a way back? The answer perhaps lies in the final act, when William stood up and walked away without looking back. Harry once believed that freedom was the ultimate salvation for every dead end. But then, standing at the brink between life and death, he turned his back not only on his father, not only on his wife, but also on those who had loved him unconditionally. And among them all, only one person was allowed to step inside that same older brother he himself had once rejected. And it was that very man who uttered a single sentence, one powerful enough to nearly stop Harry's heart in that very moment. We will never truly know what William said. It could have been a sincere truth, a final wake-up call, or perhaps just a quiet goodbye that needed no explanation. But it's clear that there are fateful moments in life when a single sentence said at the right time by the right person can change the entire course ahead. And what about you? If you were in that same moment, who would you choose? Someone who always stands by you, who supports every decision you make, even when you're walking straight into a mistake? Or someone who can look you in the eyes and say the truth, that you're the one dragging yourself into the abyss, even if that truth hurts you to your core? Share your thoughts. What do you think William said to Harry in that pivotal moment? Do you believe Harry can still return to his true self, or is it already too late? Leave your perspective below. Because perhaps through someone else's story, we might better reflect on our own journey.